Year 8. So your work for this week, as it was last week, is to read through an article and then answer some questions on it using an online quiz. Now, in order to do that, I'm going to read through this text with you. What I noticed when I looked at the quiz from last week is a couple of people were giving me some answers which I think they'd done some internet research on rather than reading the text. And the answer to every single question is going to be within the text. So I thought if I read it through with you, it's going to make it easier for you to find those answers when it comes to doing the quiz. All you need is the copy of the reading. You can have this on a screen or you can have it on paper. And if you do have it on paper, then you need something to track the reading with, which I'm going to use a ruler for. So I'm going to do exactly how you should do it, and then you will do it along with me. So we're going to start off with our keywords that will come up in this text. So to abolish something is to legally end something. Moral is concerned with what makes something right or wrong. A Quaker is a denomination of Christianity who believe that all people are equal before God, so a type of Christianity. A tract is a long piece of text. An MP is an elected member of Parliament, that's member of Parliament. And a boycott is when people choose not to use or to buy a product or use a service as an act of protest. I'll make sure that I tweak that one when I post it on ePraise. Okay. In 1807, the British Empire, one of the largest empires in the world, abolished the slave trade. 26 years later, in 1833, slavery itself was abolished, freeing roughly 800,000 people in different British colonies. Other countries soon followed suit. Although two countries with some of the highest numbers of enslaved people, the USA and Brazil, only abolished slavery in 1865 and 1888 respectively. In the eyes of many modern historians, the end of the slave trade in the British Empire was a moral victory. Important individuals and thousands of people put pressure on the government to end a trade which was still profitable, but which depended on the suffering and toil of enslaved men, women and children on plantations across the globe. So this wasn't a decision that was made because the slave trade wasn't making money. It was a decision that was made because people decided that slavery was wrong. Groups such as the Quakers had long disapproved of slavery. However, it was the notions of freedom, rights, and equality which arose from events such as the French and American revolutions which helped to spur key groups and individuals into action in the late 18th century. However, the fight for abolition would be long, and it was a fight which had to be fought with words and images. Despite the huge economic benefits of the slave trade, and despite the presence of a black community in Britain, most British people had very little first-hand experience of the slave trade or slavery. Slavery had technically been illegal in the British Isles since the court case of Somerset and Stewart of 1776, and most British-owned enslaved people lived and worked more than 4,500 miles away in the Caribbean. It was up to key groups and individuals, therefore, to bring the suffering of enslaved people to the attention of the British in whatever way they could. Individuals such as Olaudah Equiano, a former enslaved person and a member of the abolitionist group the Sons of Africa, Thomas Clarkson, a former preacher and a member of the Society for the Abolition of the Slave Trade, and Hannah More, a writer and poet, are just a few examples of individuals who worked tirelessly for the cause of abolition. Aided by the resources of the Quakers and other Christian groups, individuals toured the country and produced tracts, poems, diagrams, eyewitness accounts, and other evidence to showcase the horrors of the transatlantic slave trade to the British people. A small number of politicians too, such as William Wilberforce, did the same in Parliament, giving speeches which forced MPs and lords, many of whom owned enslaved people themselves, to confront the reality of the trade. All of this campaigning produced a passionate public response. Hundreds of petitions, with tens of thousands of signatures, were sent to Parliament in the late 18th century and early 19th century to show the people's distaste for slavery. A petition is essentially a document which people sign to show their opinion about something. Different groups, particularly women, organised boycotts of slave-grown goods to put economic pressure on the industry. And politicians continued to fight for abolition within the Houses of Parliament. The success of the Haitian Revolution in 1804 may have briefly dampened enthusiasm for abolition, so made people less enthusiastic about abolition. But in 1807, Parliament relented, and the slave trade was abolished. While this was not a complete victory for most abolitionists, for many it was seen as a step towards complete abolition, a law which would ensure the gradual decline of slave ownership, and a law which would ensure a better quality of life for people who were still enslaved. So in 1807, it was made illegal in the British Empire to buy or sell slaves, but it was still legal to own slaves. This would hopefully mean that as birth rates with slaves were quite low, as slaves died, simply new people would not be enslaved to replace them, and as slave owners knew that they had a limited number of enslaved people, they would be more likely to treat their slaves well to ensure that they lived for as long as possible. Okay, so now that you've done the reading, please do feel free to go through it again and go through it at your own pace. You can have it in front of you while you do the quiz, but you should click the link on ePraise and do the quiz.